Hello, my name is Brianna Burnett, and we are going to look right now at sound waves, okay? And as we look at sound waves, we're going to dig deeper into wave interactions that can happen with multiple kinds of waves, but we're going to focus by looking at sound. So sound, as we discussed before, they're made up of longitudinal waves, or also known as compression waves. So they're the waves that travel parallel. The particles vibrate parallel to the direction of the wave. So as the wave is going this way, the particles are going back and forth as they travel along their path. These waves are mechanical waves, which means they have to have a medium to travel through. If there's no air, no gas, no liquid, no solid, that sound wave will not travel anywhere. It's created by the vibrations of material. So the sound that you hear is from the speakers compressing the air around you. And on that compression comes my voice when it reaches your ears. And sound can travel all directions. It doesn't go in just a straight line. When I speak, my voice will go all different directions, okay? Even when it's coming from your computer screen or your phone. So the speed of sound is kind of tricky. Sound travels fastest through solids, ironically. If you think about this, even though it may sound muffled or garbled when you speak through a solid, it's going to travel faster because those particles are so much closer together, which means they're going to vibrate faster. They're going to affect other particles more quickly. Temperature also affects the speed of sound. So the warmer the air, the faster the sound will travel, okay? So if we look at this table right here, we can look at the different mediums. We've got air, water, and steel, okay? So gas, liquid, and solid. And they also listed the temperature. So if we look at different air temperatures, the warmer the air, the faster the sound travels in meters per second. So sound travels at 366 meters per second if the air is 100 degrees Celsius, as opposed to 331 meters per second if the air is freezing, okay? But then contrast this in the air, which is typically how we hear sound, compared to water. Look how much quickly it travels through water. And then look at how much faster it travels through solids, through steel. It's quite a big difference. So with pitch and frequency, pitch is how high or low you perceive a sound depending on the frequency. So how quickly basically that sound wave is moving. And you've got to consider that humans can't hear everything. This is a neat table that goes through and shows you the frequency range that different animals can hear. So loudness. The loudness of a sound has to do with how much energy is put into making the sound. So the greater the energy, the louder the sound. As you increase the energy, you're increasing the amplitude. So if you just kind of clap, barely touching your hands, there's not going to be much sound, okay? You're not putting a whole lot of energy to it. But whenever you start clapping and you start hitting your hands louder, you're putting more energy into it, and it's increasing the sound. So that's a little bit on sound waves. Let's talk more about the interactions of sound waves and what happens with these waves. So let's start with reflection. Reflection is the bouncing back of a wave after it strikes a barrier. So this is also true in a mirror, okay? It's going to hit and bounce back. So reflection can be seen in echoes, okay? So if you've ever been to a big canyon or a big empty room and you say something, you hear your voice travel out and then come back at you. So the strength of an echo depends on the reflecting surface. The harder and smoother the surface, the better the echo is going to be. So again, an echo is a reflection of your sound wave. So here's two neat little videos that show echoes, and I want you to consider the surfaces that these sounds are playing off of. So this first one is a lake ice echo. So that means that these people are throwing rocks onto a frozen lake, and I want you to listen. So how neat was that? It sounded kind of like laser guns. So if you consider this lake, it's a very smooth and hard surface, okay? So here's another one. This man is out in the Grand Canyon playing his trumpet, and I want you to listen to the echoes here. All right, so if you consider the Grand Canyon, there's a lot of smooth, hard surfaces out there, okay? So that means plenty of opportunities for the sound waves to bounce back. Echolocation is a different kind of interaction of sound waves, and this is using reflected sound waves to find objects. So bats use echolocation to find food. They send out frequencies, they send out sounds, and once those sounds come back, the bats are able to locate those creatures and swoop in and grab them to eat them, okay? Fishermen use a type of echolocation to find fish. It's not the same. We don't shout into a lake and wait for our voices to come back and say there's a fish. We use also what the Navy uses called sonar, okay? Sonar uses ultrasonic waves, which are waves we can't hear. And what they do is they shoot the sound waves that we can't hear into the water to find things. They wait on the sound waves to come back, and they know that, okay, there's a fish, there's a sub, there's something. Okay, for whatever reason, the sound wave has bounced back. It's possibly a fish. Okay, it's possibly a submarine. So sonar is the technological way that we put echolocation to use. So here's just some images of how sonar and echolocation work. The bat sends out sound wave, okay? And then once it hits a moth, those sound waves bounce back to the bat. Same with the whale, same with the submarine. And that's how they know, oh, there's an island, let's not run into it. Or, yum, there's some fish, let's go get it. So ultrasonography also uses echoes to see inside a patient's body without doing surgery. So I'm sure when you were a wee little baby in your mom's tummy, she probably had an ultrasound done so that they could check to make sure you were a healthy baby. So what they did is they sent ultrasonic sound waves that nobody could hear into your mom's stomach, and from there they were able to see you. This is a baby. Here's his head and his little legs and his abdomen. Okay, so what happens is those sound waves come off, they bounce off the baby, and then they come back. They are transmitted into a virtual image, basically, so that they can evaluate the health of that baby or different areas of your body. So interference happens when two or more waves overlap. There's two different kinds of interference, and that will dictate how the sound changes. So we have constructive interference. Orchestras use this principle when several instruments of the same kind play the same notes. So if you have a whole section of trumpets, all of them playing together is going to be far louder than if you have just one person playing the trumpet, okay? What they're doing is they are increasing the amplitude of those notes and of those sounds. So that means it's going to be much louder as it travels out to the audience. Destructive interference is the exact opposite. So in those sound waves, you have compressions and you have rarefactions. And remember, the compression is where the particles are spaced really close together. The rarefactions are where they are really spaced far apart from each other. With destructive interference, the sound is much softer than with constructive interference, because what happens is the amplitude is decreased because of how the compressions and the rarefactions overlap. So instead of two compressions coming together and making the sound louder, you have a compression and a rarefaction which pretty much cancel each other out. So car mufflers, noise-canceling headphones use the principle of destructive interference. So here's an example. This example is a little bit misleading because we know that sound waves are not transverse waves, but this easily illustrates the concept. With constructive interference, you have two waves, okay? So here's a wave and here's a wave, and you have them coming at each other, okay? Whenever they come together and overlap, you can see that the amplitude is much greater, which means you're going to have a larger, louder sound. With destructive interference, the opposite is true, okay? So if this wave is moving to the right and this wave is moving to the left, they're eventually going to run into each other and essentially cancel each other out, which means the sound is going to be muffled for a moment. Another interaction of sound waves is resonance. This is where one object causes another object to vibrate at the same frequency, okay? So some objects that use this principle are stringed instruments, okay? MRIs, which you might get at the hospital, and lasers. They all use resonance to affect, to vibrate other objects. So if you've ever roamed the street in a big city, you might have seen one of these guys putting on a performance. So this man does the glass harp, and what he is using is a principle of resonance to create music on these glasses. So listen for a moment. So he has filled these cups with different levels of water, and because of that, it creates a different note, essentially. Another type of wave interaction is called diffraction, okay? So this is where waves, so the wave originates back here, okay? What happens is, as the wave is traveling, as it's moving in a forward direction, it's going to hit a break in a medium. So let's pretend this is water, okay? The blue is water, and these yellow pieces are like a wall, okay, in the water. You'll notice that this wall has a gap, so maybe like a bridge, maybe it's like bridge pillars. As the water wave is moving forward and it hits, part of it hits the pillar or the construction here, the wave is gonna kind of get warped, okay? So that means this part that has no stumbling block is going to continue to move forward faster than the edges that got held back by these concrete pillars in the water, okay? Than these other more solid mediums. So it's going to bow out. If the opening is tinier, let's say again this is a wall in the water, the waves are going to be moving forth nice and straight, but when it hits that hole, the wave is going to get warped. The middle of the wave is going to squeeze through first, the edges are going to be held back, and that's going to create this bowed effect of the wave. Another is refraction. So this is a little bit different from reflection. Reflection is where a wave bounces directly off of something. Refraction is where the wave is bent, okay? So for example, they are shooting a beam of light towards this cube, this prism, okay? What happens is it's going to hit that cube, and because of the nature of the cube, okay, its structure, that beam of light is going to be bent. So refraction just means you're bending the wave. So it's going to be bent and come out at a different place. So you would think if it shot through something transparent, it would just move in a perfectly straight line and come out down here, but that's not the case. When it hits this medium, its path has to change. So it's going to go this direction, then it will get bent and come out in another spot than you would typically expect. Same if you look through water. If you look at an object through a glass of water, it's going to refract or bend the light. So you can see the wallpaper is just nice straight stripes in the background. but that water is refracting the light so much that it completely changes the pattern if you're looking through the glass. Same with a pencil. This image is really hard for my eyeballs because something, a bunch of crazy things are happening. You've got a straw in a cup of liquid, and because of how the light waves are transmitted or bent because of how they travel through this different medium, it looks like the straw breaks there and it's completely broken in half down here. And that's because of refraction. And that wraps up our discussion of wave interactions. So let's do a quick review. Sound waves are longitudinal waves. They are mechanical waves, which means they need a medium to travel through. We have different ways that waves can interact. We have reflection, which is when a wave bounces right off of something, runs into and bounces off. We have echolocation, ultrasonography. Those are two different types of sound wave reflection, okay? We have constructive and destructive interference, which means that we have waves that are overlapping in different ways to create either louder sounds or more muffled sounds. So again, constructive interference is when the waves come together and produce a higher amplitude, which means a louder sound. And destructive is when they cancel each other out and they muffle the sound. Resonance is when one object causes another object to vibrate at the same frequency. So we also have two different kinds of how we can break up waves, diffraction and refraction. So if you'll remember, diffraction is where you have a wave moving along at a nice straight path, then it hits a different medium that has a hole in it, and it suddenly becomes bent and it spreads out as it goes through that hole. Refraction is where you have a wave moving through an object that's a different medium, and as it hits that medium, the wave is bent, okay? It doesn't travel straight through it, it bends as it goes through. And that is it for this lesson. I will see you tomorrow.